Your garden has become a money pit and a time drain. You're buying seeds, amendments, mulch, pest sprays, watering every day in summer, pulling weeds every weekend, and at the end of the season, you're looking at mediocre yields and exhausted soil. You've been told this is just how gardening works: constant intervention, endless inputs, diminishing returns. But Japanese farmers have been proving otherwise for centuries, using a no-till method that triples harvests by working with soil biology instead of destroying it every spring. Think about it. You're spending hours tilling to fluff soil, then watching it compact, crust over, and explode with weeds within weeks. What if you could stop creating those problems in the first place and let the system regulate itself? Here's what the garden center won't tell you. Every time you till, you're starting a war you can't win. You're destroying the fungal networks that transport nutrients to plant roots. You're collapsing the air pockets and worm channels that keep soil alive. You're bringing thousands of dormant weed seeds to the surface where they'll germinate and torment you all season. And you're starting a compaction cycle that gets worse every year. Think about it. You spend 3 hours tilling to fluff your soil in spring. By June, it's crusted over and hard as concrete. By August, you can barely get a shovel in. Meanwhile, you're watering every single day because tilled soil can't hold moisture. And you're weeding every weekend because tillage creates weed explosions. You're not failing at gardening. You're fighting a design problem the garden industry sold you. Here's the brutal truth. That weed nightmare you're battling, you created it. Weed seeds can lie dormant in soil for decades, waiting for the right conditions. When you till, you're bringing buried seeds up into the germination zone where light triggers them to sprout. You're not preparing a seed bed. You're activating a weed bank. Japanese farmers observed this centuries ago and made a simple decision. Stop turning the soil. Stop destroying the structure. Stop creating the problems. But here's the reality most people miss. Soil isn't dirt. It's not an inert growing medium you dominate with machinery and chemicals. It's a living system. Billions of organisms working together to break down organic matter, cycle nutrients, and support plant life. When you till, you're killing that system. You're shredding the mycelium highways that fungi use to trade nutrients with plant roots. You're crushing the tunnels earthworms create to aerate soil and transport castings. You're exposing soil biology to air and sunlight, which kills the anaerobic organisms that drive decomposition. Meanwhile, Japanese no-till systems operate on a completely different philosophy. Observation instead of intervention. Relationships instead of domination. They watched forests build soil without anyone tilling. They noticed rice paddies that hadn't been plowed in generations were more fertile than freshly worked fields. They understood that soil structure, the aggregates, the pore spaces, the biological networks, is more valuable than any amendment you can buy. So they stopped destroying it. This is where your thinking has to shift. You've been taught that tillage is preparation, that turning soil is the first step of gardening. But it's actually the root cause of almost everything you're fighting. The compaction, the weeds, the nutrient loss, the moisture problems, the pest pressure on stressed plants. You're not maintaining your garden when you till, you're sabotaging it, then spending the rest of the season trying to fix what you broke. Now let's talk about how no-till actually works, because this is simpler than what you're doing now. You establish permanent beds, growing zones you never walk on, footpaths you never plant in. That's it. When you stop compressing soil with foot traffic, when you stop destroying structure with tillage, the soil maintains itself. Worm channels stay open. Fungal networks stay connected. Air pockets don't collapse. You're not starting from zero every spring trying to rebuild what last year's tillage destroyed. Here's the core technique that changes everything: chop and drop surface composting. When a crop finishes, you cut it at soil level and lay the stems and leaves right where they grew. You don't pull the roots, they decompose in place and feed the soil exactly where the next crop will grow. You don't haul material to a separate compost pile and wait 6 months to bring it back. The organic matter breaks down on the surface, feeding the biology that feeds your plants. This is how forests have built soil for millions of years. Leaves fall. Fungi and bacteria process them into humus. The system feeds itself. Layer carbon on top, straw, shredded leaves, wood chips, and you're doing 3 things at once. First, you're blocking light to weed seeds. Most seeds need light to germinate. Cover them with 4 inches of mulch, and they stay dormant. Second, you're preventing evaporation. Bare soil loses moisture within hours of watering. Mulched soil holds it for days. You shift from daily surface sprinkling that barely penetrates to deep watering every 7 to 10 days that saturates the root zone. Third, you're feeding soil biology as the carbon slowly decomposes into humus, the long-term fertility reserve that tilled gardens lose year after year. But here's what most people miss about this system: it compounds. Year 1, you're building the initial structure. Year 2, last year's mulch has partially broken down into rich humus. You add another layer on top, and the soil is noticeably better. Darker, more alive, easier to work with. Year 3, worm populations have exploded. The biology is thriving, and that bed is outproducing tilled soil by 200% or more. You're not mining fertility. You're building it while you grow food. The yield multiplication comes from stacking crops in space and time. Tilled soil crusts over in heat and turns to mud in rain. It's unworkable for weeks at a stretch. No-till beds with permanent structure and deep mulch stay workable through weather extremes. You can plant, harvest, and replant year-round in the same footprint because you're never waiting for soil to dry enough to work. Where a tilled garden gives you 2 crops per bed per season, you're succession planting lettuce every 2 weeks, tucking carrots between slow-growing brassicas, planting cool season greens under tomatoes that will shade them in summer heat. And this scales to any space you're working with: a 4x8 raised bed, an in-ground plot, container gardens on a balcony. The principles don't change: permanent structure, surface composting, carbon layers, no disturbance. Even HOA restricted yards can run this as ornamental edible beds with clean edges and mulched surfaces that look more intentional than tilled rows ever did. This is where it gets interesting. You can stack plant functions so the garden weeds itself, waters itself, fertilizes itself. The Three Sisters system is the teaching template because it demonstrates every principle in one planting. Corn grows tall and becomes a living trellis. Beans climb the corn, fix nitrogen from the air, and fertilize all 3 crops. Squash sprawls at ground level with broad leaves that shade out weeds and act as living mulch that holds moisture. Think about what you're replacing. In monoculture rows, you'd plant corn in one bed, stake beans separately, give squash its own space. You'd fertilize the corn because there's no nitrogen source. You'd mulch or weed constantly because there's no ground cover. You'd water more often because bare soil between plants evaporates moisture. The Three Sisters eliminates all of that by designing relationships instead of managing isolated plants. You can apply this logic to any combination. Lettuce under tomatoes uses shade that would otherwise be wasted. The tomato canopy prevents bolting in summer heat, while the lettuce acts as ground cover that suppresses weeds and holds moisture. Clover between brassicas fixes nitrogen, attracts beneficial insects, and creates a living carpet that nothing else can grow through. Deep taproot plants, like daikon radish and comfrey mine nutrients from subsoil layers your shallow-rooted crops can't reach. Then you chop those plants and drop them as surface mulch to bring those nutrients up where they're needed. Every plant is performing multiple jobs: food production, soil building, companion support, problem prevention. Here's what most people miss about moisture in polyculture systems. You're not just reducing evaporation with mulch. You're creating microclimates where the plants themselves hold humidity. Walk through a monoculture row garden at noon in July, and you'll feel heat radiating off bare soil. Walk through a no-till polyculture bed, and the temperature drops 5 to 10 degrees because broad-leafed ground covers are shading soil. Taller plants are creating canopy, and the whole system is breathing moisture into the air instead of losing it to evaporation. You go from daily surface watering that barely penetrates an inch to deep watering every week that saturates the root zone and trains plants to root deeply instead of staying shallow and dependent. Pest prevention works the same way. Monoculture rows are pest highways. A cabbage moth flies down the line and lays eggs on every plant because you've concentrated its host in one convenient buffet. Polycultures confuse pests through scent disruption and visual chaos. When cabbage is interplanted with onions, herbs, and flowers, the pest has to search harder and finds fewer targets. Meanwhile, those flowering companions are attracting ladybugs, lacewings, parasitic wasps, the predator insects that regulate pest populations before you ever see damage. You're not spraying because you designed a system where the predators handle the work. The seed-saving loop closes everything into true self-regulation. Let your best plants go to seed in undisturbed soil. Lettuce bolts and drop seeds that germinate in the same bed next spring. Tomatoes drop fruit that sprouts volunteers. Herbs reseed themselves year after year. You're not ordering from catalogs every season. You're selecting for plants adapted to your specific microclimate and soil. After 3 to 5 years, your saved seeds outperform commercial varieties because they've evolved for your exact conditions. And here's the labor reality nobody talks about. After setup, you're harvesting instead of maintaining. No tilling means no hours behind a machine every spring. Minimal weeding after year 1 because carbon layers and living ground covers prevent germination. Deep watering once a week instead of daily sprinkler duty. Pest management handled by beneficial insects you attracted through design. The work that remains is observation. Walking beds, noting what thrives, making small adjustments, and harvest. You've designed an ecosystem that regulates itself instead of a production line that demands constant management. But here's the reality. You don't need to convert your entire yard this weekend. Start with one bed, one 4x8 area, one large container if that's all you have. Layer 4 to 6 inches of carbon directly on existing soil. Cardboard first if you're smothering grass or heavy weeds, then straw or leaves on top. Wait 2 to 4 weeks for it to settle and start breaking down. Plant directly through the mulch into the soil below. No digging, no tilling, no sod removal. You're smothering what's there and building new soil on top. Your first planting can be dead simple. 3 sisters in the center, lettuce around the edges, maybe some herbs. Water deeply once to settle everything. Then monitor by sticking your finger 3 inches into the soil. When it's dry at that depth, water deeply again. Top up the carbon layer as it breaks down. Chop and drop spent plants instead of pulling them. By season's end, you'll see the difference. Fewer weeds, better moisture retention, healthier plants. By year 2, the soil will be noticeably richer. By year 3, that bed will triple the production of any tilled plot you've managed. If you're working with beds that have been tilled for years, the transition is even simpler. After your last harvest, lay down a heavy carbon layer, 6 to 8 inches of straw, leaves, or wood chips. Let it sit over winter. In spring, plant through the mulch without touching the soil below. Done. The carbon smothers weed seeds. The undisturbed soil rebuilds its structure. You're in no-till mode from day one. HOA restrictions actually work in your favor here. No-till beds look intentional. Defined edges, mulched surfaces, no bare dirt, vertical structures supporting climbing crops. It reads as landscaping, not farming. Frame it as ornamental edible beds. Keep the edges clean, and most neighbors won't realize you're running a production system until you're harvesting bushels from what looks like a decorative border. The hardest part is the habit shift. You have to resist the spring urge to till. You have to stop reflexively pulling every weed and instead observe which ones might be providing benefits. Some are dynamic accumulators, some attract beneficials, some break up compaction with deep roots. You have to shift from asking, "What do I need to do?" to asking, "What relationships can I design?" Stop managing. Start observing. The garden will tell you what it needs if you're watching instead of imposing solutions. Think of this like compound interest for soil. Every season you wait to transition is lost fertility, lost biology, lost yields that could be building on themselves. Start one bed this spring, and by fall, you'll have proof. Next year, you convert 2 more. The year after, your whole growing area is producing at triple capacity, and your input costs have dropped 60 to 80%. No tiller maintenance, no fuel, minimal purchased amendments, seeds saving themselves. Your labor drops to harvest and observation while your yields multiply because soil builds instead of depletes, and you're stacking crops in space and time that tilled systems can't support. Here's what nobody tells you about the actual cost of tillage. It's not just the 3 hours you spend behind the machine in spring. It's the fungal networks you destroy that would have fed your plants for free. It's the worm population you decimate that would have aerated your soil and deposited castings. It's the carbon you oxidize into the atmosphere instead of building into humus. It's the weed seed bank you activate that will haunt you all season. It's the compaction cycle you trigger that gets worse every year. You're paying with time, money, and yields for a practice that creates the problems you're spending weekends trying to fix. Meanwhile, the Japanese approach is ruthlessly simple. Observe what works, design relationships that regulate themselves, step back, and let biology do what it's been doing for millions of years. They're not managing soil. They're partnering with it. They're not fighting weeds. They're preventing conditions that allow weeds to thrive. They're not spraying pests. They're attracting predators that handle pests as part of the ecosystem. The difference isn't effort or genetics. It's understanding that a garden is a living system you design once and then observe, not a production line you dominate with constant intervention. This is where most people fail, and it's not what you'd expect. They understand the principles. They see the logic. Then they try to do everything at once. Convert the whole yard. Implement every companion planting combination. Overhaul their entire approach in one season. They get overwhelmed, abandon the system, and go back to tilling because at least it's familiar. Don't do that. Start with one bed this month, 4 by 8 feet. Layer the carbon. Plant 3 sisters, corn, beans, squash in the center. Tuck lettuce around the edges. Add some herbs if you want. Water it deeply once. Walk away. Check soil moisture once a week by sticking your finger down 3 inches. Water deeply when it's dry at that depth. Top up mulch as it breaks down. Chop and drop when plants finish. That's it. Let that bed prove the concept while the rest of your garden runs however you've been running it. By fall, you'll have harvested more food from that single bed than you've grown in twice the space using tillage. The soil will be darker, richer, more alive. The weeds will be minimal because the carbon layer and ground covers prevented them. The watering will have been once a week instead of daily, and you'll understand in your bones, not just intellectually, but viscerally, that this works. That's when you convert 2 more beds next spring. That's when the system starts compounding. If you're skeptical, good. Don't take my word for it. Run the experiment. 1 bed, 3 sisters, carbon layer, permanent structure. Compare it to your tilled beds at season's end and see which produce more food with less work. The evidence will be undeniable because you're not fighting biology anymore. You're working with it. Here's the choice in front of you right now. You can keep tilling every spring. Keep fighting weed explosions you're creating. Keep watering daily because your soil can't hold moisture. Keep buying amendments to replace the fertility you're oxidizing. Keep spending weekends maintaining a system designed to create problems. Or you can design 1 bed as a self-regulating ecosystem this month and watch it outproduce everything else you're growing while demanding a fraction of the labor. Every season you wait is a season of lost soil building. The biology you could be cultivating right now. The fertility you could be compounding. The yields you could be stacking. The time you could be getting back. This isn't about perfection, it's about starting. 1 bed, 1 planting, 1 decision to stop destroying what you're trying to build. The garden center wants you on the treadmill, buying tillers, amendments, pest sprays, weed barriers, irrigation systems to fix problems their approach creates. The Japanese method wants you observing relationships, designing polycultures, feeding biology, and harvesting while the system regulates itself. One approach keeps you paying and fighting. The other gives you time back and compounds results year after year. Start with 1 bed this month, 3 sisters, 4 to 6 inches of carbon mulch, permanent footpaths you never walk on, deep watering when soil is dry 3 inches down, chop and drop when plants finish. By fall, you'll have proof that this works. By next spring, you'll be converting the rest of your garden because you'll have seen what's possible when you stop fighting and start designing. Design once, observe, harvest, get your weekends back.